Newspapers and journals have concentrated recently on the prospectus for Putin using a nuclear weapon, most likely low-yield one in the conflict with Ukraine. This danger, while sizeable, is not the only one that the world faces as a result of Putin's reckless invasion. Equally problematic and perhaps more deadly in my view. Is the threat of a civil war in Russia following Putin's departure from office. This opinion piece explains why I believe a civil war is likely.
First, there is no agreed upon and legitimate means of ousting Putin. Putin's autocracy has been built on the institutionalization of the Russian political system and the demobilization of political activity. Russian elections are a sham, and in any case, Putin does not need to re-election until 2024. The war is unlikely to last that long. In my view, as Russia's people and economy are undergoing truly horrendous losses and so pressures to end, it will presumably increase. But Putin has gone all in on his Ukraine policy, compounding the original mistake of invasion and putting himself in a position from which he cannot retreat. Short of resignation, this means the only way to change course from the war is to eliminate Putin physically. Yet going so turns again in Russia's history upon the door to using violence is a regular means of politicals in Russia.
This implies the succession becomes a fight. When he originally came to power, part of Putin's appeal was his ability to balance various constituencies in the Kremlin, including the Siloviki and members of the security services and the liberal business-oriented integrationist camps. With the 2014 annexation of Crimea, that careful balancing act went out of the window, and Putin threw his lot in with the Siloviki. Not only in this camp more prepared to use violence to stay in power, it makes it more likely from the opposition too. These groups were never easy bedfellows, and the pressures of collapse of the Russian military will turn them on each other.
Second, the regime's recently announced mobilization has conjured up its own gravidiggers. To further paraphrase Marx, Putin is likely the magician's apprentice who has lost control of the demons of the netherworld conjured up by his spells. When the soldiers are fully equipped and trusted to go off to the front lines, that are not guaranteed that they will not turn on their masters. It is plausible that they will rationally calculate that they face better odds against their own commander than the NATO-equipped Ukrainian forces, for instance. From the very beginning, this war lacked majority popular support and appears to have been driven by the imperial fantasies of senior politicians. Now the masses are being drafted to fight it. They could turn on their own leaders.
Indeed, the nature of Putin's quasi-fascist regime has been to mobilize certain sections of the population while keeping most of society depoliticized. While scholars disagree over whether Russia qualifies as fascist today, even those who come down against the fascist label like the Marlene Loirel argue that the presence of multiple paramilitary groups inside Russia does meet this single fascist criterion. Such organizations as the Night Wolves, Yumarmia, a youth army group, and the Cossacks represents pro-regime, and it has to be said, mostly pro-armed formation. These groups are well armed and numerous. In the event of succession struggle, then there are specialists in violence of differing allegiance. Such a situation makes civil war probably.
This does not even take into account the third and most commonly cited reason for a potential fracturing of the Russian state, the ethnic dimension. While Russia is roughly 80% dominated by ethnic Russians, one of the legacies of Swedish social engineering was the geographic concentration of its ethnic minorities. The ethno-federal system of the Russian Federation posited Chechnya as a homeland of Chechens, Chuvsha for the Chuvash, Buryatia for the Buryats, and so on. In some of these ethnic republics, ethnic Russians are a small minority, and this is a particularly the case in the North Caucasus. Even before the war, Russian analysts warned for the consequences of the Russian exodus from the region, with the growing perception that ethnic minorities are bearing the cost of the war, as witnessed by protests in Buryatia and Dagestan in response to encouraging ethnic resentment in Russia to undermine it, as in Zelensky appealed to ethnic minorities.
This is not even considering the presence of wild card actors like Ramdan Kadyrov, a Turkish regional warlord who dominates Chechen politics mostly through his ruthless, is capable of marshalling his own armed forces and has previously come out strongly in favor of the war, even the point of using nuclear weapons as well. Kadyrov has tied himself so closely to Putin that if the Russian leaders was removed, it is difficult to imagine how Kadyrov could cooperate with any anti-war successor. Based on history, in fact, the most likely response from Kadyrov would be to act against anyone who opposed Putin, including with his own army.
The final reason to think a second Russian civil war is imminent lies in the fact the Russian society has increasing across for firearms. While guns have been tightly regulated in the past, like in the most European countries, since the start of separation in Luhansk and Donetsk provinces, the country has become awash with them. Even before the start of the current conflict, Russia had seen some mass shooting in educational institutions of the kind we associate with the United States. What makes them different to those in the US, however, is the anti-state salience of such mass shooting, evident in the most recent such event on September 26. Violence become a more ready solution if the means are within easy reach.
Of course, critics will say I'm hourly pessimistic and too committed to a future in which civil war is inevitable. This may indeed be right. I was among those who thought Putin would not actually invade Ukraine fully a second time due to the enormous risks involved. But the longer this pointless war goes on, the more dramatic will be the denouement. Ultimately, it seems to me the mix of nuclear politics, succession, armed populace, ethnic grievances, and penetration of firearms into the country will lead to a second Russian civil war, one for which the United States and her partners must be prepared given by enormously destructive weapons involved.
Richard Arnold is Associate Professor of Political Science at Muskingum University, where he teaches comparative politics and international relations. The author of the two books on Russia, Arnold has published in two of their journals concluding Post-Soviet Affairs, Theoretical Criminology, Problem of Post-Communism, and PS Political Science and Politics. He is also a member of the Punars Network and has presented to the US and UK governments on issues involving Russia.